Please join me in welcoming our special guest, Merwan Dubash.
So what I'm going to do for the next couple of days is to talk to you about my life, my incidents, the experiences I had with Baba. And these are all personal experiences of mine with Baba. I'll talk to you about some stories that my parents had. I'll throw that in as well. As Chris said, I've been in Toronto now for 50 years. I've been in Canada. But the first 20 years of my life, I lived in Karachi, which is now in Pakistan. And those were the years when I had the experience, the meetings with Baba in those first 20 years. That was the time when we met with Baba. Now I'm going to start my talk with a couple of incidents about my parents. In fact, my first meeting that my parents had with Baba, just to give you an idea of the connection they had and how far it goes back. I'll start with my mother, Rhoda. I think some of you know Adi and Rhoda, right? In fact, some of them, told me that when they met me. So my mother, Rhoda, came from an Orthodox Zoroastrian Parsi family in Karachi. At that time, I'm talking about the 1930s, 1940s, 1930s, 40s. Baba's reputation in Karachi among the Parsi community was not good. There were all sorts of false stories, talking about he's a fraud, he doesn't keep silence, he only keeps silence in public, he goes inside and talks with the manli, he does this, he does that, all sorts of things, a lot of negative things going on about him. And Mom, of course, as a small child, heard all these stories. So the impression on her about Meher Baba wasn't that great. Then Mom and my dad start going together. And they've been going together quite a while. They get engaged in 1945. And my mother was asked to accompany my grandmother, who was known as Mummy, by the way. Her pet name was Mummy. In fact, everybody, including her family, knew her as Mummy. And in fact, Baba and the Manli knew her as Mummy. If her real name was Nays, if somebody ever mentioned Nays to the Manli, you would get a blank stare. If you mentioned Mummy, they'd go, oh yeah. So she was known as Mummy. And my mother, Rhoda, after being engaged to Dad, was asked to go with her to Bombay because my grandmother was going to have some surgery. Also accompanying them was another person called Minu Kharas. Some of you might have heard of Minu. Minu was a very old Baba lover as well. Now, Minu and my dad were brought up like brothers. Although they were first cousins, they were brought up as brothers because Minu stayed with our family for a long, long time. So they were going to Bombay. And the day before the surgery in hospital, my grandmother is sobbing. She's a little upset. And Minu turns to her and says, trying to cheer her up, he says, why are you crying? You're living, you should be happy that you're living in the time of the living prophet. And my mother, Rhoda's ears already, all of a sudden prick up and she says, who's the prophet? And Minu says, Meher Baba. She says, what? You believe in Meher Baba? And Minu says, yes. And then all the alarms bell went off. And she says, what, does Adi believe in Meher Baba? And Minu says, yes, hasn't he told you? At which point, Minu realized that he'd let the cat out of the bag big time. So now Rhoda is most upset about this. My mom is most upset about this. She's been going with my dad for 5-6 years, and she didn't know. And my dad was coming to the hospital to visit at about 5 at visiting time, 5 o'clock in the evening. So a little before 5, she goes and stands on the balcony where the staircase comes up, and she's looking and waiting for my dad. And as soon as she sees Dad at the bottom of the stairs, she's going, Adi! Adi! She's shouting at him. Do you believe in Meher Baba? Do you believe in Meher Baba? And Dad is looking around, wondering what's going on. He's trying to hold her off. And finally, Dad comes up the stairs, so she grabs his arm and says, Adi, do you believe in Meher Baba? And Dad says, yes. And she says, Adi, we've been going up for 6 and 7 years together. You never told me. And my dad very innocently says, well, you never ever asked. So Mom says she was most upset about this. That whole night, she was tossing and turning. She couldn't sleep. She was crying all night. She was deciding now that really I love Adi very much, and should I marry him? But I really don't want to get into contact with this fellow called Meher Baba. I really don't want that, because she's heard so many negative stories. She says, finally I decided that I love Adi too much, so I'll marry him. And she convinced herself that she would draw Adi away from Meher Baba. Of course, little realizing that this plan is going to rebound on her. In fact, she is the one who's going to get caught in the divine fisherman's net. So the marriage takes place, and after the marriage, again, my grandmother is going to Bombay for medical treatment. My grandmother didn't have good health. And in those days, the go-to place for good doctors was Bombay. So she would always end up there. And this time, Minu Kharas was going as well. And my dad thought this was a good opportunity. So he asked Rhoda to go with them as well, because he knew that if Minu and Mummy were there, they stood a good chance of maybe getting Baba's darshan. And in that case, Rhoda would get it too. So she went. And sure enough, when they were in Bombay, Minu writes to Baba and says, Baba, we're here in Bombay for Mummy's treatment, and her daughter-in-law Rhoda is with us. Is there any chance we can get your darshan? So they get a response from Baba saying, yes, you can have my darshan. And he also says, and I quote, he says, bring Rhoda, she is one of us. So they go to Nagar. They're going to Nagar by train. The train is scheduled to get there at 8 in the evening, but it's late. Instead, it gets there at 10 o'clock. They get to, in those days, this is 1945, right? And, I mean, Nagar is dead at 10 o'clock at night. There's nothing moving. And apart from that, public transport in those days consisted of the horse tonga. If you remember what a horse tonga is, it's a two-wheel horse carriage. There was no rickshaw, no nothing. But Baba had sent Adi K. Irani, Adi Senior as we call him, to the train station to meet them in his car. So Rhoda was impressed by that. She said, oh, Meher Baba thought of that, to send someone to pick us up. And on the way, while they were driving to Meherabad, Adi says that Baba told him that if the train comes on time, then bring them up to Upper Meherabad to meet me. But if the train is late, take them to Lower Meherabad, because that's where their room was going to be, where they were going to sleep the night, and then I'll see them in the morning. So he says, I'm taking you to Lower Meherabad now, and Baba will see you in the morning. They get to Lower Meherabad. And of course, Mummy and Minu Kharas get out of the car, and they're talking to the other Mandli members who know, catching up on things, chit-chatting. And all of a sudden, somebody yells, Baba's coming, Baba's coming. In those days, there were none of those trees and shrubs that you see in the front of Meherabad now. In front of Mandli Hall, it was absolutely barren. And if you stood near Mandli Hall or near the Dharamshala, you could see right up the hill clearly. And this was in the middle of the night, where it's of course pitch dark because there was no electricity there in those days. But when somebody came down the hill, he came with a lantern. So they could see somebody walking with a lantern, and in the lantern's light, they could see Baba. So they said, Baba's coming, Baba's coming. So Baba comes, and he greets them. That's the first time my mom saw Baba. And she says she just couldn't take her eyes off him. Just couldn't take her eyes off, kept looking at him. Anyway, Baba greets them and says, come on, Pilamai. Pilamai was one of his women mandli. Baba called Pilamai his spiritual sister. And Pilamai was originally from Karachi also. And my mom's family knew her. So mom knew her. So when she saw Pilamai there, she felt a little comforted that at least there's somebody here I know. Otherwise, she didn't know anybody. So Baba and Pilamai take him into, it was one of the rooms attached to the Dharamshala, the old Dharamshala that's there today. And Baba goes in the room, checks the room, makes sure everything's there, blankets there, because it's February and cold, water's there, everything's there. And he says, okay, now you two, I'm leaving, you two have a good rest. And at 5 o'clock in the morning, Pila will come and wake you up. Pila is Pilamai's short name that Baba used to use for her. Pila will come and wake you up at 5 o'clock. And be ready by 6, because at 6 o'clock, we're going to the pictures. So Rhoda says, I've come all this way to meet this great spiritual personality, and the first thing he tells us is, we're going to the pictures, and that too at 6 o'clock in the morning, she said. She sort of, anyway, she said, I took it in stride. But the thought did cross my mind. So sure enough, in the morning at 6 o'clock, they were ready. And 2 buses pulled up in Lower Merabat. And in one of the buses, there was a front seat left vacant for them, so they got in. There were 2 buses because apparently this was just after Mera's birthday. And some women had been invited from other cities to come and celebrate the birthday. That's why there were so many women there. And those women were staying up on the hill. So there were 2 buses full of women. So they sat in the bus on that seat, and the bus goes towards Nagar. And my grandmother tells Rhoda that Baba is sitting 2 seats behind us, and sitting with him is Mera. So my mother turns to look like that, and she said she just couldn't once again take her eyes off Baba. So she kept turning and looking, turning and looking. And my grandmother was quite a prim and proper lady. So after a while, she nudges Rhoda in the ribs and says, Rhoda, behave yourself. You know it's not good manners to stare at somebody. So mom says I had to sit tight like this and keep my eyes up front, because I didn't turn and look at Baba any longer. So they got to the cinema. The cinema was Sarosh Cinema, which is the cinema opposite the trust office today. Of course, today it's all dilapidated and run down and a mess. But those days it was owned by Sarosh Irani, who was one of Baba's mandli, and Sarosh was going to show the film. So they got into the cinema, they're all seated. Mom says she and Mummy were seated next to or close to Baba. And she said throughout the picture, she couldn't take her eyes off him. She just kept looking at him and looking at him. She doesn't remember the name of the picture. She doesn't remember what it was about. She does know that it was an English picture that they saw. That's about all she remembers of that movie. And very unusual for Baba, he sat through the whole movie right till the end. Normally his habit would be, he would sit in 15, 20 minutes, half an hour, 3/4 of an hour. His work was done and he would say, come on, let's go. And everybody who accompanied would get up and leave. But this time he sat through the end. By 10 o'clock, they were back in Merabat. And they had an early lunch. They were given an interview by Baba under the tin shed where his gadi is. Baba was sitting on the gadi. And then Baba asked someone to take him, meet the other women, Manli, Mera, Mani. So they went into their room, the East Room, which we know today as the East Room, and met them. And like that, time passed and they took a little rest. And by the time all this had happened, it was evening and time to go. So they left. Of course, took Baba's darshan and left. My mom says that after that meeting, all the bad thoughts, all the antagonism she had against Baba, everything just vanished, simply vanished. But that was just the beginning of Rhoda becoming his. It was not till 1952 that she said she got the conviction that Baba was God in human form. So that's how Mom first met Baba and Dad. Sorry, now Dad's story. Dad's story is a little different. My dad knew about Baba since his school days. How? Because Minu Kharas lived with them. And Minu was an ardent seeker of God. And after looking a lot, he finally met Baba in Nasik in 1931 in Circle Cinema, the old Circle Cinema that they used to have in Nasik. And immediately he saw Baba, he recognized that his search had ended. He had found the one he was looking, just like that. So then he would go back and forth to Baba quite often in those days. Baba would call him, he would go. So he would talk to my dad and my grandmother, Mummy. None of the others in Dad's family were interested. His father wasn't interested in Baba. Neither were his two younger brothers. But they didn't interfere with Dad or my grandmother going to Baba. They could come and go as they wanted to Baba. That was never an issue. So in 1947, in the month of April, a circular came out saying, or before that a circular came out saying that in April 1947, Baba would be in Madras, which is today it's called Chennai, for 4 days, giving darshan. And if anybody wanted to meet him, they could come for 5 minutes. 5 minutes, that's all. So Minu, by then, was a very staunch follower of Baba. He hadn't seen Baba for a few years, so he decided he would go. And he tells my dad, Adi, he says, Adi, come on. You've been following Baba for so long, but you haven't had a chance to see him yet. So come on, this is a good opportunity. So my dad was a little reluctant because Mom was 8 months pregnant, expecting in another month. But my mom and my grandmother, and they talked him into coming, saying that, no, we have enough support. Mom said she's in good health, all this sort of stuff. So Dad got convinced. And he agreed to go with Minu. So the two of them ended up in Madras on the day before Baba. The day Baba arrived, they went to the station to greet him. And Dad says, my first sight of Baba was him coming out of the train. And of course, Baba met Minu because he'd known Minu, and then Minu introduced my dad to him. And directly from the train, Baba was going to a darshan program arranged in a locality of Madras called Saidapet. So both of them followed Baba to the location of the darshan. There they actually took proper darshan of Baba by bowing down to him and usual, taking his darshan. And then Baba turns to them and says, why don't you come for all the days of the program that I'm here? And of course, they readily agreed right away that they would. So they came every day. On the fourth day, the last day that Baba was in Madras, he tells them in the morning, you go and check out of your rooms, and tonight you come and stay with the Mandli. And then tomorrow, when I leave on the train, you come with me on the train and we'll go together because the route was the same. So of course, gladly they did that. My dad says at night he was sleeping in a room right up against the wall. And on the other side of the wall was Baba's room, he said. And he was so excited by that, he said he hardly slept that night. So the next morning, of course, they all leave from Madras by train. My dad, Minu Kharas, they are with Baba in the train, and they accompany him all the way to Pune, where Baba gets off. And then they went to Bombay and, of course, back to Karachi. So that was my dad's first encounter with Baba, first meeting. And Dad says that until I met Baba, he said, I was very slowly crawling towards him, he said. But after I met Baba, he says, that crawl turned into a gallop. He said, and there was no stopping me. So that's Dad's story of him first coming to meet Baba. So now I'm going to talk about my stories with Baba, which start in 1947 when I was born. I mean, somehow he seemed to have a hand in most of the major decisions in my life. For my birth, my mother, she would go for routine checkups to the doctor. Everything was fine, but all of a sudden, a few weeks before I was due, the doctor says, Rhoda, it's very likely that you're going to have a miscarriage. So Mom was most upset. She said, so she went back and she said, I implored Baba silently, although she still didn't believe in him at that time. This was now only 1947. She wasn't a full ardent follower of him. She says, I implored him silently that, Baba, please give me the child. Please give me the child. I really want the child. And if you do, I'll dedicate him to you. Well, things worked out all right. I'm here. So, and then a few days after my birth, we got a cable from Baba, which I'll read out. It says, my blessings to Rhoda and her child, and it was signed Baba. And a week later, another cable turns up, which says, Rhoda Adi boy to be named Merwan. Blessings, Baba. So that's how he gave me my name. There are two spellings of Merwan. Baba gave me the spelling in this cable exactly is the same as his. But the more common spelling is another spelling that, for example, Merwan Jasawala uses, which is M-E-H-E-R. So there are various versions of the name. But that was in the cable and that was we used. The next episode in my life, which had some implication, was as a small kid, 4 or 5 years old, I would regularly run a temperature, not a high temperature, but the temperature, off and on. It would come and go like magic. And the doctors in Karachi treated me for over a year with no effect. Finally, we went to Bombay, which was our go-to place, as I said, for doctors. The first doctor I saw in Bombay looked at me and said, he has chronic tonsils. It just needs to be removed. In those days, of course, that was an operation, surgery. You know, you had to go into hospital, be anesthetized, and it was cut out, and big deal. You had to stay in hospital for a week or so afterwards. So when something like that is about to happen, you turn to Baba and ask him that, Baba, is it okay? Do I have your permission to do it? So they asked Baba. And Baba says, yes, if the doctors say an operation is needed, then you go ahead and do it. So he agreed to that, and the operation took place. Then in the Parsi community, we have a ceremony called the Navjot ceremony, which is our initiation into our religion. It's similar to the communion in the Roman Catholics and bar mitzvah in the Jewish religion. Of course, my parents knew by now that Baba didn't like traditions and rituals and ceremonies and things like that. But they were concerned that since we were living in a very anti-Meher Baba community, Zoroastrian community in Karachi, if I didn't have my Navjot ceremony, I would be picked on by the kids, they would be picked on by the adults, and so on and so forth, and Baba's name would be dragged with it. So they wrote to Baba and said, Baba, we know you don't like rituals and ceremonies, but because of these reasons, we are thinking that we would like to do Merwan's Navjot, but only if you agree. So the response comes back that yes, of course the response is always written by Erach, And he says, Baba says, you carry out the traditions of your religion. And he says, but if you decide to do his Navjot, Baba gave 3 dates. He said, do it on one of these dates. And the dates were the 16th of April, 19th of April, 11th of May. This was in 1956. So he actually gave the dates. And I think, it was a long time back, I think it was the 19th of April that was selected out of those 3. So he had a hand in that. Then higher education. Of course, I'm in school, go to school and everything. But in 1960, when we were in Guru Prasad, I was only 13 years old. I still had a couple of years to go to school. Baba all of a sudden turns to me and says, have you decided, this was Baba's way of saying think or decide, have you thought of what you're going to do after school? I said, Baba, yes, I want to be a chartered accountant. I had already decided that. I had a chartered accountant as a neighbor. One of my close relatives was a chartered accountant. For some reason, I was taken by what they were doing. So Baba says, chartered accountant? I said, yes, Baba. He says, what do you have to do for it? So I said, first you have to become a BCom, Bachelor of Commerce, get a degree. And then you serve an apprenticeship with a chartered accountant firm and you take a professional exam. If you pass the exam, you qualify. So then Baba says, where do you want to do it? I said, Baba, there are many options. Of course, Pakistan is one, but the degree in Pakistan, as soon as you step out of the country, is not worth the paper it's written on, it's useless. So he said, what are the other options? I said, Baba, there's the UK or there's Canada. So he said, tell me a little bit more about it. So I had done all that research, surprisingly. 2 years before I'd even left school, I had done all that research. So I said, Baba, this is what you have to do in England, this is what you do after Canada, and so forth. And he listened, and he says, okay, you do this. You do your BCom in Karachi, and then after you do that, you go to London for your chartered. A chartered accountant is the equivalent of a CPA. For your chartered accountant exam qualification, you go to London. So that's what I did. Of course, Baba being who he is, he picked the right place to go because in those days, the English designation was the most valued in the world. Anywhere in the world, you could use it. Finally, marriage. Ruby and I didn't marry till 1972, which is 3 years after Baba passed away. But look how he influences it. Again, one day, I think it was in 1918, sitting in Guru Prasad. When I'm still in university, I have 2 years of university to go. Baba all of a sudden says, have you thought about getting married? I was taken a little aback. Didn't expect that question from him. Before I could say anything, my dad pipes up and says, Baba, he's already married. Baba says, what's he saying? I said, Baba, he's gone a little crazy. I don't know what he's saying. As soon as I said that, Baba's expression turned very serious. He looked at me and says, is this how you talk about your father in front of outsiders? There were other people in Mandali Hall at the time. So, is this how you talk about your father among outsiders? Is this how you insult him? Is this how you berate him? I said, no, Baba, only here. You know what Baba used to tell us was that in front of me, in my darbar, in my court, you can say anything about anybody. Your mother, your father, your sister, brother, grandparents, you can say what you like about them. So that's why I said, Baba, only here. So Baba said, only here. I said, yes, Baba. He turns to my dad. He doesn't go around saying things like this about you outside, does he, to your friends? My dad said, he dare not, Baba. Dad was pretty strict, you know. So then he turns to me again. He says, only here. I said, yes, Baba, only here. Then his seriousness disappears and he's back to normal. And he says, what's he talking about, he says. So my mother or father piped up and said, Baba, you said some things about Merwan earlier on. So we wanted him to say single so that if you ever wanted him to, or you wanted him to provide service or anything, he could easily come. He had no commitment. So Baba says, then he turns to me and says, don't listen to them. Don't listen to them. You want to get married? You get married. That was the end of it. Now, with hindsight, there's a couple of things about this that struck me. You know, at the time when Baba tells you things like this, you just say, yes, Baba, and that's it. You don't give any thought or anything to it. But unfortunately, when I prepare for talks like this and stuff like this, all these weird ideas come to you. And with hindsight, this was one of them. With hindsight, I thought it was very unusual for Babas to say, don't listen to them. Don't listen to your parents. Normally, it would be the complete opposite. He would say, you must listen to your parents. You must do what they want. They are your parents. You've got to respect them. And here he's saying, don't listen to your parents. I thought that was most unusual. And the other thing, of course, was that I also thought that if Baba hadn't done this, at the time when I wanted to get married, and I went to them and says, I want to get married, we would have probably had a big argument and probably a fight in the family because they wouldn't want me to get married. But in one fell swoop, Baba got rid of all that. So when I wanted to get married, it was a piece of cake. You know, they just said yes. I mean, there's no choice. So like that in every step, he seemed somehow to have some influence. Now, I first met Baba in 1948 when I was 19 months old. This was in Khushu quarters, which today is the trust office. No, it's known as Mehr Nazar today. They don't use the Khushu quarters name any longer. If some of you have been there, you know where Bhauji used to sit in that office, which was Adike Rani's office. Next to it, there are two big rooms. And Baba used to use those two big rooms as meeting rooms for people when they came in those days. So there was a small group of us from Karachi, my parents, myself, Minu Kharas, my grandmother, and a couple of others from Karachi. And the date is a very easy date to remember. It was the 31st of December, 1948, last day of the year. So Baba first calls Minu in, and because Minu has known him the longest. So, and then afterwards he tells Minu, go and bring Merwan to me. So Minu takes me from my parents and carries me to Baba and puts me in Baba's lap, and they say, Baba played with me for 5 minutes and then put me on the floor. And I was crawling around. It's what they call a farshi floor. It's those big cement tile type things on the floor. And then Baba called my parents in, and they were talking. And I must have moved to the back of the room, and I was sitting, they tell me, and all of a sudden I said, Baba. And that got his attention. So he looks up, he points to me and says that out of the many on the waiting list, I have selected him. And we must have spent, I think it was an hour and a half with Baba in that meeting, and that was it. It was just that one meeting. So that was 1948. 1952 was the next time we met Baba. This was rather unusual circumstances. 1952, Baba came to America. That's when he had his accident. And he was going back now after recuperating a little bit in the US and then a little bit I think in Europe, in Switzerland, places like that. He was now on his way back to India. And he wanted to get back to Bombay urgently. But on the day of his flight, I think it was BOAC in those days, what is now British Airways. The staff went on a wildcat strike, and all of a sudden all traffic was disrupted. Still, Baba took the flight up to Karachi. And a cable was sent to Minu Kharas saying, Baba is arriving in Karachi, please come and meet him at the airport. And bring no one, come yourself. So Minu tells my dad, he says, you know, Baba, I've got this cable from Baba. And Baba said, don't bring anybody. But quite often, because Minu has now known Baba's ways a little bit, So he knows what Baba does sometimes. So he says, I'd like you to come with me, but you can't come with me to Baba. You have to wait outside. Because sometimes Baba will want some work to be done, some running around to be done, some this to be done, that to be done, and you would be very useful in doing that. So my dad agreed. He said, yes, that's okay. I'll wait outside. I won't come with you to Baba. And Minu also told the rest of us in the Karachi Baba group that although Baba says he's only going to be at the airport for a few hours and he doesn't want to meet anybody, be ready. Be ready, because at any time he could change his mind and say, okay, let them come and see me. So we were already on that day when Baba came. Minu went to greet him. Baba had his leg in a cast, so he was in a wheelchair. And in those days you could book a reception room at the airport for private use. So Minu booked that so that Baba and his group would have their privacy. And now with Baba were 5 ladies: Meera, Mani, Dr. Gaver, Meru and Rano. So the 6 of them. And Baba comes. So Minu greets him, takes him to the room. And then Baba says, how is everything? The usual, how are you, this, that. And he says, you came alone? So Minu had to tell the truth. He says, no, Baba. So Baba said, I told you to come alone. He says, Baba, I thought I'd bring Adi Dubash with me because in case you needed some work, some running around to do this and that, he's good, he can do that. So Baba said, okay. He says, where is he? So he says, Baba, he's waiting outside. So Baba said, call him. So he calls him. So Dad now is with Baba. And then an hour or two afterwards, because Baba doesn't have a ticket now to go from Karachi to Bombay. Because of the strike, he's stuck in Karachi. He asked he says, if the other people want to come and meet me, let them come also. So we all ended up at the airport. Jingbang, a lot of the whole Baba group was there, including my brother Homi, who was the first time, my younger brother, it was the first time he met Baba there. Now, Baba is in a rush to get to Bombay. He says, I must get to Bombay at the next available flight. So Minu says, Baba, this Adi works in shipping, my dad. So he's good, he can get an airline ticket for you. I don't know what shipping and airline ticket connection there is, but Minu said that, and Baba asked my dad, okay, go and get me 6 seats for Bombay. So Dad, at the time there was a counter at the airport where you can actually book tickets and stuff. So he went down to the counter and he goes to the clerk and he says, want 6 tickets for Bombay. The guy goes, of course everything was manual in big books, big ledgers. He flips through his book. He says, sorry sir, there's not even 1 seat available. So Dad goes back up to Baba and he says, Baba, there's not even 1 seat. Baba says, no, I have to go, try again. So Dad goes again. And the clerk says, Arey sir, you just came a little while back. Why are you here again? Please. He says, please, my elder brother. Always Baba was referred to as elder brother in situations like that. You wouldn't use the name Meher Baba because Baba didn't want people to know he was traveling as Meher Baba. So always use the elder brother term to describe. My elder brother has to get to Bombay. So he looked and he says, Baba, he said, sir, there is 1 seat now. So Dad goes up and tells Baba, 1 seat. Baba says, what am I going to do with 1 seat? He says, minimum, I need 4 seats. Okay, not 6, but minimum I need 4 seats. He wanted Meera, Mani and Gaver to accompany him. And Meru and Rano could follow on whatever flight was available after that. So he says, go back again. So Dad goes back again. Now Dad's not used to Baba's ways of this, right? So now Dad is a little reticent. The clerk has already been a little abrupt and rude the second time. So he's standing there waiting to see, now what shall I do, while there are other people at the counter. Then when the people go, he goes meekly up to the clerk and the clerk, you sir, what's the matter with you sir? How many times have I tell you? He says, please, somehow he got him to look again. This time the guy looked and he says, "Sir, there are now 3 seats available." He goes up to Baba, he rushes up the stairs, 3 seats. Baba says, "No, I told you I want 4. 4 minimum." "Go again," he says. So Dad goes back again. Now he really doesn't want to go to the clerk. He's really almost afraid. Not afraid, but you know what I mean. You know, it's sort of like he's standing there in a corner while the clerk is doing some work. And then all of a sudden the clerk looks up and he sees him. Then he says, "What's the matter with you, sir? You here again? I told you. How many times must I tell you?" He gave him a big firing. But somehow Dad pleaded, begged, whatever he did, he convinced him to look again. And the guy looks and he says, "Sir, there are 4 seats now." So Dad rushed up the stairs, and of course they got the tickets for Baba, and Baba left. So that was the meeting in Baba must have been at Karachi airport for a good 5, 6, 7 hours or so, while all this was going on, while he had to get on the flight. So he was there for a decent period of time. Now, Minu was quite astute in things like this. Minu Kharasi said, "I noticed that while Baba was in Karachi all this time, he never ever put his foot on Pakistan soil. He was always in the wheelchair, and the feet were up." Now, I don't know what that means or anything. But in the old days, before the country was partitioned between India and Pakistan, Baba used to go into parts of what is Pakistan very frequently. He used to go to places like Lahore, used to go to Quetta, where Dr. Gavir's family comes from. He went there a couple of times, Karachi so many times. He had relatives in Karachi, many other places in that part of the world. But after the partition of the 2 countries, this was the only time he came to Pakistan. And that's why Minu said that, "I noticed that Baba never put his foot on Pakistan soil." I don't know what that means. I don't think anybody does other than Baba. There was another interesting thing in 1952 that took place also. This was before Baba's accident. In 52, before Baba went on the US tour, he told Iraj, "Of course, I'm going to take you." And Iraj said, this was just after Manonash had finished. And Iraj said he was so exhausted. He thought he wouldn't be able to serve Baba the way he wanted to be served, that he thought Baba should be served. He said, "I just didn't think I could do it." So I told Baba, "No, Baba, I can't come." So Baba said, "What's the matter?" So he said, "Baba, I'm so exhausted, I won't be able to serve you the way I should serve you. So please take somebody else." And then Baba said no, and this went back and forth for days between the 2 of them. One day Baba got very annoyed. And Baba told Iraj, "What good are you to me? If you really want to stay with me, you should follow what I want to say. Otherwise, why are you staying with me? You should go away." Something like that. This was in a conversation. So Iraj said, after Baba said that, it kept playing on my mind. And then one day he said, "I decided I would leave. Because Baba's right. If I can't follow what he wants me to do, what good I am to him?" So he's making his plans how to leave. He says, "Now I'm thinking what I should take with me." And he says, when I think about that, he says, "There's nothing I can take with me because everything that I'm wearing, including my underpants, belong to Baba. They were all given to me by Baba." So he's making this plan that in the middle of the night, when it's pitch dark, he will leave Mirazad naked. So nobody can see him. He's thinking all this. The next day, one of the mandli comes and knocks on his door and says, "Baba wants to see you." So Baba says, "Okay, I'll agree. You're not coming with me on this tour of America. But he says, you must do something for me in return." So Iraj says, "Yes, okay." So what is it? He says, "I want you and Pendu to go around India and Pakistan. I'll give you the names of the cities. I want you to go to the cities and give talks about me." So he said, "Okay, Baba." Now, one of the cities that was on the list was Karachi. So the two of them came to Karachi in 1952, and they stayed with us for a few days. That was really my first connection with Erach. Always remember that. And so they came, they gave their talk. They stayed there a few days and left. But Erach says that with hindsight, really, with hindsight, I was so exhausted after this tour of India and Pakistan. I would have been much better off going to America with Baba, he says. And he says his greatest regret was not being with Baba when he had the accident in America. That was Erach's greatest regret, he said. There's another story of 1952 about a boating trip that he and my dad took, him and Pendu, but I think I'll run out of time if I go on that. But if we have some time later on, remind me, I'll tell you about it. So that was 1952. Next time we met Baba was in the Mass Darshan program in 1954 at Wadia Park. It was September 1954. It's called the Mass Darshan program because according to reports, some reports, as many as 100,000 people came to see him on that day. Whether it's true or not, I don't know, but certainly there were thousands and thousands of people came to see him on that day. Wadia Park is right in the middle of Ahmednagar. Today you can't even see it because it's all built up and there's a cricket stadium and everything, but it was a wide open spot in the middle of Nagar. I was only 54, so I was only 7 years old. There's a couple of things I remember and a couple of stories that were told to me. What I remember was that there was a dais built for Baba, not very high, about 2 steps high, that high, with a chair on it where he was sitting and people were taking a darshan. But after a while, there were so many people coming and so fast that Baba actually came and sat on the dais, came out of his chair, sat on the dais, and with both hands, he was giving prasad to people, giving darshan. It was that fast. Just people coming, human flow of people, taking his darshan, just touching his leg and going, touching his leg and going, like that, all the time. Now the prasad was chana, gram, which was sugar-coated with a white sugar coating. And I was a 7-year-old kid. I love that stuff, right? And somehow, I found myself at the back of Baba's dais. And at the back were all these baskets full of this prasad, the white chana. And I'm looking at it and going, oh boy, I like this stuff. And then when I didn't think anybody was looking, I took a bit. I think I must have done it maybe 2 or 3 times. Of course, if I was older, mind you, if I was older, I would have never done it. But if I was older and I'd done something like that, Baba would have found some way of finding out about it and telling me off. But at 7 years old, he let me off. No repercussion. At least not in this world. The other thing I remember myself as a young kid was at the end of the Savas when Baba left, he left in Adikirani's car. It was a big blue Chevrolet. Actually, the body of it is still, I think, in one of the hostels in Lower Mehrabad, just the body. Massive 1947-48 Chevrolet. But instead of sitting in the car, Baba sat on the roof. Actually, you may have seen it in the film if you've seen the Wadia Park film. And we later, as he was going, he was waving to the crowd. We found out later that the reason Baba did that was many people over there hadn't had a chance to take his darshan because there were so many people. So Baba thought that at least they should see him before he left. That's why he got up on the car, so that everybody could see him. The next 2 stories were sort of related to me by my parents. At this darshan program, Baba had asked for, I think, 100 poor people to be brought there. And Baba was going to wash their feet, give them prasad, and then they would be given lunch. They were on one corner away from the main crowd. And all of a sudden into this activity, when Baba was giving the prasad, both hands, one of the men mandli come and whispers in his ear, and Baba stops the darshan program, and he gets up, and he goes over to the poor people's side, because they had been served lunch. But they said, how can we eat unless the host himself eats? How can we eat? We can't eat, so we can't take a bite till the host eats. And Baba respected, it's a tradition in some places in India. So Baba respected that. He got up, he went over there, he took some food, had a bite or two. And once they started eating, he came back and the darshan started again. The next story has a bit of a link to this. There was a bunch of us from Karachi. My family, 4 of us, Mummy, Minu Kharas, again 2 or 3 other people from Karachi. This was a whole day program. And in the afternoon, we started becoming very thirsty. We became very thirsty, lack of water. We couldn't find drinking water, no bottled water or any of that stuff in those days. So we were looking for water. And we asked 2 or 3 people, we asked one of the Mandli people, he said, why don't you go behind Baba's dais round the corner, and you might find a bucket of water there. So we did, and sure enough, there was a bucket of water there. So we look at the water, and somebody says, this water is quite murky, it's not very clear. Minu Kharas, who supposedly was the expert in those days about Ahmednagar, and because he'd been there a few times to see Baba, Minu says, no. Ahmednagar water is always like this, is never clear, it's always murky. We must have been so thirsty, we drank it all up. Hardly a few seconds had passed, and one of the men mandli comes by, and he's looking around, and he says, and he looks at us because we were the only people there. He looks at us and says, there was a bucket of water here. Where did it go, do you know? We said, yes, there was a bucket of water, but we drank it. We drank it because we were thirsty. He says, oh, no. Oh, he says, no. He said, Baba is not going to like this one bit. Oh, this is not good news. Tell us why it's not good news. We just drank the water. We didn't do anything wrong. He says that when Baba washed the feet of the poor, he asked that the water used for it be collected and put in the bucket. So we had just drunk the water that Baba used to wash the feet of the poor. Just imagine. Today in India, even the poorest wear slippers. In those days, the poor would walk bare feet, no slippers, no nothing. It was, the feet were, really, really dirty, and Baba had washed their feet, and we had drunk that water. So we had all sorts of thoughts going through our mind that, oh my, now what's going to happen? What sort of, are we going to sickness or this or that, upset stomach? You won't believe it, not one of us even had an upset tummy. Not even an upset tummy. So that was what I remember about the 54 Darshan program. The next time, I and my parents also, normally we would meet Baba at the same years. Was in 1958, Baba had the Savas at Mehrabad, right? And this was the Savas was in February. And when Baba sent out the circular, it said children under 17 would not be allowed. So I was only 10. I got most upset. I said, how can, I want to come and this and that. And I'm sure little encouragement from my parents also. They convinced me to write a letter to Baba asking for permission to come. You could write to Baba openly in those days, there was no restriction. So I penned a letter to Baba asking to come to the Darshan program with my mummy and daddy, as I put it in the letter. Of course, we got a response from Iraj. And, or from Baba, I should say. Of course, Iraj writes the response. And in the letter, Iraj very diplomatically says, how happy Baba was to receive my letter, and then he loves me and he loves all children, and all children are permanently with Baba and all this sort of stuff. And then he says, and I quote, "You must not, capital N-O-T, feel sad if you are not, again capital N-O-T, allowed to be with your mummy and daddy for Mirabat Savas." I mean, even a 10-year-old figured that out, that was a no. So I forgot all about that. But then when they went for the Savas, of course, I went with them also. I was going to go to, Dad was going to go initially to the Savas early because he was asked to come as a volunteer. And I was going with my mom to Panchgani. Now, Mom had first cousins in Panchgani who owned a boarding school. Panchgani is famous for its boarding schools even today. So we were staying with them. But we always passed through Bombay, and we would spend a few days with Bombay with some very good friends of ours. So while we were staying with them, 8 o'clock in the morning, one day the phone rings. Our host picks up the phone and says, "Adi, the call's for you." So Dad answers, and it's one of the Mandli, and it says, "Adi, Baba would like to meet little Merwan. Is that possible?" And Dad says, "Of course it's possible." Thinking that, it'll be next day or the day after. He says, "When would Baba like to see him?" He said, 10 o'clock. It's already 8, right? Baba says 10 o'clock. So of course, Dad wasn't going to say no. He said, "Of course we'll do it." And we rushed and did everything, and we got there, had breakfast, dressed, everything, got there by 10 o'clock. Baba was staying at Nariman and Arnavas Dada Chandji's home. They were his mandli. Baba, for many, many years when he went to Bombay, he stayed with them. Their house was on the second floor, I should say. And the stairs going up were from the outside. So when we got there, Bhav was waiting at the bottom. And he says, come on. Baba's waiting for you. Let's go." So we started climbing up the stairs, and he turns to my parent and says, No, not you two. Baba only wants to see Merwan. So you stay here." So they waited at the bottom of the stairs, and I went up with Bhav up to the Nariman and Arnavaz's house. And Baba was sitting there in the sitting room on a big couch. February can be very hot in Bombay in those days. And he was in his shorts, no sadra or anything, just his shorts. And it was the first and only time I saw him with his hair open. Otherwise, I've always seen it with it tied at the back. It was the first and only time when he was there with his hair open. To tell you the truth, I can't remember what he said. I mean, I was only 10 years old at that time, right? But he must have asked me the usual things about, how are you, and this and that. And then I sat there for maybe 5-10 minutes, literally, and then Baba said, "Now, off." So I left, the shortest meeting I ever had with him. Now, again, hindsight, this thing playing up here. I wonder whether I got this darshan because I wrote the letter to Baba or not. I don't know. But the thought goes through this mind. It's a vicious thing. It keeps giving you these thoughts. So that was 1958. I'll tell you, we have a little time, right? I'll tell you a story now about, I'll diverge a little bit from myself and tell you a little story about my parents' wedding. Some of you may have heard it if you've heard Rhoda speak. Mom wasn't a Baba lover then, but she knew about Baba by then, of course, just before she got married. And she said a few days before the wedding, don't know what came over her, she sort of tells, this is a silent challenge to Baba, right? No, silent, internal. That if you say who you are, then you will send rain, heaven's blessings, which is rain. She actually said rain. on my, heavens on my wedding day. Yeah, sprinkles, a little bit like that. And she said she forgot all about it after that. On the day of the wedding, in those days, they married on July 1st. So July, although it's the monsoon season, Karachi is a semi-desert area. So it's always dry, sunny, hot as hell, and the morning started off as that. But my dad says that as the afternoon came, it was like somebody was pushing these dark clouds over the city. He just stacked them up. And by late afternoon, it started raining. And it wasn't just rain, it was like cats and dogs. And the wedding was in the evening, 6:30. The wedding was outdoors in the grounds of our Parsi Institute with lawns and gardens and everything. Everything got washed out. There was knee-deep water in the city because Karachi can't handle heavy rain. The priest who was doing the wedding refused to come. He says, "How can I come?" You know, our Zoroastrian priests wear these long dresses. It's not a sadra, but it's a sort of an overdress that down to the ankles. He says, "How can I come? I can't come through waist-deep water with this and get all drenched." So my dad's brothers, they had to pick him up literally and put him in the car through all this water. I think my dad said about 800 people were invited to the wedding, which is not unusual in that part of the world. He said out of that, about 150 turned up, close friends and relatives and things like that. So on the way to the wedding, my mom, it's raining cats and dogs. The wedding car has this decoration, you know, these colored paper and stuff on it, and the colors running off. It's running onto a sari, and she's with her mother. Rhoda's with her mother and a very close friend of the mother's, and her mother is sobbing, and her friend is telling her that, "Why are you crying? Why are you crying?" He says, "Rain is heaven's blessings." And Rhoda's ears picked up all of a sudden. She said she heard it, but then again she forgot about it. So that was their wedding. Now there's a very interesting sequel to this. In 1963, I think it was, we were in Guru Prasad, and Sarosh Irani, Baba's mandli, his son was coming. His son was living, I think, in the States here, and he was marrying a European a lady. So Sarosh picked them up at the airport, and then on the way to Nagar, he stopped in Pune. Baba was in Guru Prasad to take Baba's darshan, let them take Baba's darshan. So they came and they took darshan, and his son's name was Merwan also. And Merwan tells Baba, "Baba, please give us your blessings for our wedding." And Baba sort of indicated. And they went away. And Baba told Sarosh that after the wedding, on the next day, all of you come and take my darshan again. On the day of the wedding, Baba tells Iraj, "Call Sarosh and find out what's happening." So Iraj goes, he comes back after a while, and he says, so Baba says, "What?" So Iraj says, "Baba, Sarosh is screaming on the phone. He says, 'Tell Baba it's raining cats and dogs over here.' He says, 'All the arrangements we made out in the compound, everything has to be cancelled. We now have to find a hall. Tell him it's raining cats and dogs.'" So Baba didn't say anything. He just heard it. The next day they came for darshan. So after taking darshan, so Baba said, "How did the wedding go?" And Sarosh's wife, Vilu, "Baba, what did you do, Baba? The whole thing was washed out. It rained and rained and rained." So Baba points to my mom who was sitting there and says, "Ask Rhoda what happened on her wedding day." Now remember, Mom had just sent a silent challenge. Even Dad and I didn't know about this. She had just sent a silent challenge to Baba. And my mom says she was so taken aback, she's sitting with her, absolutely gaping like that. And finally, Erach had to say, come on, Rhoda, Baba's waiting, tell the story. So Mom tells the story. And then after Mom finishes telling the story, Baba says that you forgot to tell him that you, after sending the challenge to me, you forgot all about it until you were on your way to the wedding. He reminds her of that. So that's how he was. Do I still have some time? 2 minutes? Let me see if I can. I told you I can tell you a story about Erach and Pendu in 1952 when they came to Karachi to talk about Baba, right? So they were there for a few days, and after giving the talk, there was nothing to do. So my dad, who was a member of the local boat club there, said, come on, we'll go for a boat ride. So they said, oh yeah, that's a good idea. They liked the idea. So all of us went with them, of course. We just sat in the clubhouse over there, and my dad took Erach and Pendu. Dad was in his swimming trunks because he was the rower, and Erach and Pendu were in their street clothes. And they get in the boat, they hardly pull out 20, 30 feet. And Pendu says, Adi, there's water coming in. And Dad looks and he says, it's almost like a small fountain at the bottom of the boat. And he says, within seconds before he could do anything, the whole boat was underwater. Yeah. And Erach and Pendu were in the water. The boat was floating in the water. Erach was okay. Erach could handle it. But he said Pendu, being asthmatic, Pendu was having trouble because, he was bogged down with his clothes, his heavy shoes, everything. So Dad had the presence of mind to turn the boat over. And they clung onto the boat till help came from shore, and they went. Erach and Pendu also had their travel documents in their pockets. In those days, it was actually letters. They weren't passports because Pakistan and India had just a few years back taken place, so all that wasn't put in place yet. So their papers were floating on the water, and they were absolutely mortified. They thought all the documents would be destroyed because, and the papers were written in ink, not type, in ink. They thought everything would be destroyed. Anyway, they then went home and changed and came back. And the papers, after they dried, believe it or not one word had smudged on the papers. So that was that. The next week, my dad goes to the boat club, and he goes straight to the workshop, and he says, what happened to and he asked the manager, he said, what happened to that boat? He said, sir, we tested it, we checked it, we couldn't find anything. He says, what are you talking about? The water was coming out like a fountain, I could see it. He says, where is the boat? Show me, I want to look. He said, sir, the boat is not here, it's out on the water being used. So for some reason, Baba wanted Erach and Pendu to have a dip in the ocean in Pakistan. Baba didn't put his foot in Pakistan. Maybe they were his proxy. I don't know. So I'll end for now. How about that? And we'll continue tomorrow. Jai Baba.